wish that I could say that after my little run-in with Sylvester, things got easier for me. But unfortunately, that just didn't seem to be in the cards. Because after that, Alice became convinced that I needed to increase my training regimen. So, for nearly 2 weeks now, for almost half the day, it seems like, every day, I've been doing intense training with Alice. Despite her negative opinions on Eliza, she even invited her to join, saying I needed to put the extra work in. According to Alice, the one hit Sylvester managed to get in was far too much for her taste. Based on what she knew about me, and the conflict I had with Sylvester, and the manner in which I usually trained with her, it seemed that my preferred method was a long-range to mid-range casting. The type of person who prefers to keep my opponent at a distance, and use my head rather than trying to play a game of fisticuffs. She said that my particular style was all well and good, but if I actually wanted it to work more effectively, I needed to work on my defense. And that's the reason she brought Eliza in as well. Her chosen tactic for this particular training was basically all-out assault. What seemed to be a never-ending attack against me, not only from Alice herself, but even Eliza. Alice would attack me with a flurry of close-range to mid-range attacks, and Eliza effectively acted as sort of a surprise attack mechanism in the training process, going out of her way not to be seen or heard, and attacking without warning from basically anywhere. I was actually surprised at the level of skill that Eliza had picked up in a short amount of time. Neither me nor Alice had actually trained with her before in terms of combat training, and yet, without very much instruction, she seemed to be fairly competent at it, as if she had been doing some practice and training of her own. And unlike Alice, who preferred a very straightforward method of combat, which was grueling in and of itself, trust me, when it comes to Alice, she seems to be much more than she appears when it comes to fighting. It appears our first round of training, she was taking it very easy on me. But this time, I was getting no such leniency. Her speed was blinding. Most of the time, I couldn't keep up with it at all, only able to catch short glimpses of her as she slipped in and out of blind spots. It was insane. Trying to defend against it was basically next to impossible in and of itself. Luckily for me, she kept it to a minimum when it came to lethal attacks, despite the fact that lethal attacks are actually her preference. If she had been trying to kill me, she would have. But whether you call it lucky or not that she decided to go with simple fisticuff, bludgeoning attacks would really be a matter of opinion. Alice's speed and physical strength on top of that was completely absurd. Adding on top of that Eliza, who had a knack, it seemed, for being nearly completely unpredictable. It was next to impossible to figure out what she was going to come at me with. Eliza didn't work with close-range attacks, but that didn't mean what she was doing wasn't dangerous. And boy, was it. And for multiple reasons. First of which, you wouldn't find anything Eliza was using inside of the magical index, or any other magical book for that matter. She seemed to create everything she used personally. A one-of-a-kind adaptive style that seemed to fit nearly any situation. That seemed to take the form of primarily magical projection, meaning that she would conjure things, giving them magical form, and then use those objects to attack you rather than an outright blast or explosion. And the things that she conjured, well, quite frankly, I'm not really sure how to place them. Like some mad mixture of children's toys and machinery, ranging from very basic in their design all the way up to complex. And she had them for just about everything. magical bear traps that actually looked like bear heads from a teddy bear, long-range projectiles that looked like bullets but way oversized. And despite their cartoonish appearance, the amount of damage you'd take if you were hit by one was astonishing, and that hardly even begins to cover it. I never knew what she was going to pull out of her hat next. And during the entire training process, I couldn't counterattack at all. It was part of the training, Alice said. My primary focus needed to be on increasing my defensive capabilities, being able to cast and recast defensive spells rapidly without the incantations. It had to be reflex. Magical armor was good, but it would only block a single hit. So if you took a blow, you had to be able to recast it immediately. Not only that, I had to increase the power of that magical defense so that it could take more damage without breaking. The amount of energy you pour into the magical armory dictates how much defensive power it gives you. On top of that, I had to maintain constant evasion, trying to dodge as many blows as I possibly could. It was impossible to defend them all. Using Sanctum, I had to learn to use them all simultaneously. The magical armor, Sanctum, high-speed evasions, all while bouncing my focus back and forth between all of those and countering the attacks of both Alice and Eliza. To say it was difficult doesn't even come close to doing it justice. Adding on top of that Alice completely forbid me from using Clockwork Combat Engine. I wasn't allowed any modifications whatsoever. It had to be me. No bonuses. For about the first week after every day of training, I'd look like a bruised potato. Lumps everywhere, scorch marks, cuts, broken bones. I mean, they'd heal me back afterwards, but ugh. On this particular day, we had already gotten our usual training out of the way, and both Alice and Eliza had taken the time to heal up the majority of my wounds. I still had some pretty heavy scuffs and bruises, but most of my bones were back in place, so at least there was that. And add into all of this that I still haven't been able to come up with a plan to deal with this whole situation, the problem of suitors coming after Alice, this magical war nonsense. I'd been racking my brain for the last 2 weeks trying to come up with something. I'd even managed to get a hard copy of the alignment, the alliance agreement, standards and practices, laws and order, and an in-depth look at the rules that govern both of the magical sides, both light and dark. But the sheer amount of information was absurd. Piles of paperwork with countless clauses, situational rulings, and laws, and it all just seemed to go on forever. Even after being able to magically absorb all the information, I still had to go back and check it. There were so many things that were convoluted and had cross-category changes to the way things work. Like depending on the situation, the rules might entirely change. For example, I found out about Sylvester's little bit of holdout information that he used to save his backside. Apparently, when two sorcerers enter a duel, the official challenger of the duel has the ability to back out and surrender to the one that he challenged in order to save his hide, but only if he's represented by one of the two alliances. Ugh, it was all just so frustrating. Currently, me, Alice, and Eliza were sitting in my room, which I had basically converted into the main location where we would discuss the matters at hand and our plans to try to resolve them. A planning room of sorts. Currently, I was sitting in a chair looking over all of the boards that I had placed up around the room with the various information that I had collected from all the research that I had done. An endless web of connected dots and information. Who's on what side, who's got what resources, number of casters working in that particular alliance, the general belief of what their power level was as a whole, and what gave them that power. The different inciting incidents that were causing conflicts between the two sides. It was maddening. I just sat there in my chair looking at the boards, furious at my brain for not being able to figure this out. Meanwhile, for the most part, while we were there, Alice just seemed to watch me, observe me while I thought about it. And Eliza seemed to just tinker away on whatever she was working on at the time. She always had something new. You know, Reginald, Alice said, if you keep staring at that board like that, you're gonna get a headache. Trust me, Alice, I already have one, I responded frustratedly, rubbing my hand down my face in exhaustion, trying to avoid the scuffs and bruises. There's gotta be a solution to this problem. There has to be. Some gap, some technicality, something that'll let me work this to my advantage. My stupid brain just won't see it. Work, damn you. Work, I said, scratching my head, glaring at the board as if it were my mortal enemy, when suddenly we all heard a clicking sound.